Welcome to China Watch. Today we're talking about the BRICS nations. In September, Xiamen will be holding the 9th summit for the BRICS nations. And today I'm here with two guests to talk about what we can expect from this summit and kind of the future of BRICS. Our first guest is Liu Baosheng. He's a professor at the Economics University of International Business and Economics in China. And he's visiting from the University of Maryland. Thank you for being on our show. And our second guest today is going to be Professor Wang Li. He's currently the director of the Beijing BRICS National Cooperation Center and the professor at the Beijing Normal University. So let's go ahead and get started. Today we're talking about the BRICS Summit that will be held in September. So my first question to you, Professor Liu, what can we expect to be discussed at this event?
Well, this 9th summit takes place in a very critical juncture where the whole world actually is in a confusion but still filled with hope. So when the BRICS really started, they really wanted to have a big mission to solve the world economic order issues through the transformation by the leading position of the emerging economies, getting more united and set up a platform for discussion, and also to institutionalize a number of projects. And at the moment, the 9th summit will portray, I think, number one, the Belt and Road Initiative, because we still need a lot of communication work for the whole world to buy in this idea of Belt and Road Initiative, because it is Chinese brainchild, but it is really there to be shared by all the connecting countries inclusive of the BRICS nations. Number two is that how these economies now are really converging can really be able to work together for a co-development scheme so that they will continue to provide a showcase for the world economic prosperity so that they can really play a leadership role. And the other is also with the rising protectionism and nationalism going on, particularly after the Donald Trump is seated in the White House. So how would the BRICS countries would react towards such a sort of situation? And right now, when the world economy is slowly recovering, how these nations can really find more of the synergy to work together, for example, on those infrastructure development and how the financial vehicles can be better facilitated to help to revive the temporary slowdown or even slump of certain part of the BRICS community. So these are very important issues, and particularly when China is now serving as a host. I think now cultural people-to-people exchange are utterly important. The fact also that it takes place in Xiamen, where the Xiamen is very well known not only for its grand scenery, but also for the Global Investment Forum and a Global Investment Expo. So that's something is also very attractive, and also that's also very much themed this special summit.
Okay, thank you. You have anything to add to that?
As we know, in the past decade for the BRICS cooperation, it has evolved from a kind of grouping for the emerging countries. Actually, now from that point, develop into a kind of comprehensive platform for the new emerging countries to cooperate with each other. In addition to the economic cooperation, they also developed their cooperation in terms of strategic as well as political issues. For example, in the past decade, they have developed the mechanisms ranging from the meeting among the foreign ministers as well as the high advisors for the security issues. For this year's summit in Xiamen, it will be one of the top priorities for the BRICS countries to develop their cooperation in that field. In addition to that, they also would like to institutionalize their mechanisms, especially for the mechanisms ranging from the summits. Now it's time for the BRICS to institutionalize themselves, to coordinate, to get the perfect coordination among those different mechanisms.
Okay, so I understand what you're saying is that this event is going to kind of bring all the countries together, and from a political standpoint,
right.
we're going to see them kind of getting more involved and more integrated. But let's go back to the economy or the economics of this for a second. From the last few years, we've seen a lot of, specifically to you, Professor Liu, we've seen a lot of slowdown in these economies. We've seen a lot of issues in Russia with American sanctions because of the Crimea. So American sanctions, the UN have put sanctions on Russia. We've seen a lot of issues in Brazil. They had a political scandal down there that cost their economy, basically. There was a big issue down there. And also in South Africa, we've seen a lot of problems with their economy, negative growth rates. My question is, what can we expect in the short term in terms of the economics and the economies of the BRICS countries? How do we see a turnaround? And also, kind of what is the future in terms of the economies?
Well, the whole world had really high expectations on those big emerging economies, and eventually it was translated into the BRICS countries. They will serve as the driving engine to lead the whole world economic recovery and provide the economic growth. So far, BRICS have really done I should say a great job in contributing to the world growth by roughly 50%. So, but as you pointed out, they also have their own internal problems. From high expectation, now the world really is entering into a sort of confusion, how BRICS will be able to function. So there are two sticking problems here with the BRICS countries. Number one, they are part of the world economy, but they are very much unrelated in terms of the geography, in terms of the industrial structure, in terms of even the national governance level. So how can they really work together? That's number one. Number two is that, when the world is shifting from Atlantism now to Pacificism, now with the Chinese Belt and Road. So who are there to sit in the driver's seats? So there is still a cooperation, but in the meantime, there are competition among these countries. So how can these BRICS economies really can find the right mechanisms so that they are able to prevent a vicious rival for the same amount of partner and also for the same type of industrial structure. And right now, the good part is that now we have the BRICS new development bank that is in place, and also the sister bank, the AIB, in which the BRICS countries are all founding members of it. So they are there to really substantiate the real operation by targeting infrastructure development projects, and also by building the capital pool. So that's something very realistic and very substantial. So therefore, the world is refocusing its attention to the BRICS. So I think there is a great potential to be really tapped among these countries. After all, they take roughly 23% of the whole world economy. And there is a lot of complementarity in terms of the industrial value chain, and in terms of the financial cooperation, and also people-to-people exchanges. So the test lies in, number one, rivalry position from those conventional big nations. Okay. Number two, do they really have the right type of governance structure so that they continue to function instead of fighting within? Number three is that does the whole world create a sort of a peaceful environment for BRICS countries to continue to play such sort of a leadership?
You made an interesting point about integration. You said now the Brexit is happening. You're seeing big nations like the United States pull back from the Pacific area. They're kind of moving away from their pivot to Asia, which was kind of Obama-era policy. We kind of see with Trump kind of pulling back. It's very unclear what his Asian policy is. And we see the Brexit kind of causing the EU to kind of fall apart. There's lots of concerns about what's going to happen with the future. What I'm posing to you, Professor Wang, is from a political standpoint, do we think that this will work? Has the BRICS nations come together? Like you pointed out, there's many differences. There are geographical differences, there's government differences, there's even trade differences. It's, you know, does China want to invest this much time and energy to create this, which could possibly fall apart?
I would speak very highly about the achievements of BRICS cooperation in the past decade. Actually, the most important reason is that they would like to see there to discuss about a lot of issues, a long list of political issues, even some of them they are world affairs. You know, another point is that in the past decade, as we know, they have developed a certain kinds of strategic and political trust. The third point is that they have evaluated the importance of so-called BRICS, which is going as the openness, inclusiveness, and win-win cooperation. I think with these three perspectives together, they now know the right direction for those members is to work together, to sit there together, to discuss about issues by means of diplomacy rather than military or the other means such as the sanction, embargo, which are the important concepts of the very old-typed Western failure system.
Yeah. Professor Wang mentioned the bottle is half full. I shall bring some of the challenging issues that BRICS are really facing. Number one, how to differentiate BRICS versus, for example, many of those regional agreements like the G20, for example, and OECD and Shanghai Cooperation Group. So it seems that there's quite a number of overlap. We have to really highlight the unique character of the BRICS. So that's number one. Number two, as I mentioned, despite of the individual power they hold, particularly in their particular region, the governance is still very much in question. So there has been a sort of regional agreement there to replace, to fill the gap. But in the meantime, do they really function to solve the world problem? And so the other issue is how the BRICS will really deliver. For example, do they need a permanent, ongoing secretariat to drive home the number of issues that are there?
I think that's why we would like to emphasize the importance of BRICS cooperation. For the emerging countries, as we know, especially for the BRICS countries, they are developing a new, totally new idea for the world issues, especially if we take the NDB, the New Development Bank of the BRICS countries as example, we find within this bank, they share the same speaking flow, they share the same culture within this bank. There is totally different from the International Monetary Fund.
But going back to Professor Liu's point, without a governing body, who's going to be responsible for pushing those through and holding people accountable, holding the different BRICS countries accountable for meeting quotas or implementing this type of strategy? You're talking about a new type of global governance led by the BRICS. Who's going to be responsible if there's no governing body to kind of push those efforts through?
So far as we know, there's no permanent secretary for the BRICS. They are having the rotating presidencies chaired by different of members annually, and they would like to promote the importance of negotiations and coordinations. The second, I think with those strategic partnerships together, the strategic partnership between China and Russia, as well as the other members bilaterally or multilaterally, we are experimenting certain kinds of new principles to guide the global development issues, the climate change issues. The third is that not only for their own interest of those emerging countries, it's for the obligations and international responsibilities globally.
I share your concern because the major problem for those developing economies lies in the fact they are short of the rule-making power. So it reflects the BRICS countries that, okay, do we have an institution like permanent secretariat to drive home a number of issues that are keenly discussed? Because all those leaders of the BRIC countries, they are very busy. So, okay, after Xiamen, they may be busy with many other things.
Yeah, they
so
go
who
home
are
and
there
they
to
have
follow
their own
up?
thing.
Yeah, to drive home. So the other is that based on what rule? I think the same challenge also applies to the Chinese Belt and Road. Okay, we have grand mission, we have long dream, and we have very sincere friendship. But without the right rules, you do not have transparency. People do not predict what is going to happen to me if I join or rejoin a certain type of scheme. I don't know. Join the community. You are going to benefit.
Yeah.
So broad promise and also mutual trust and build a high context, that's fine. But to follow, we need implementing rules. So this is, I think, a reminder to every country that is really involved in this agreement.
We're talking 15 years now. The first meeting, I think, was in 2006 when the first BRICS had their first meeting. How long do you need to build trust before you institute these kinds of fundamentals in order to move the whole group forward? And going on with that, the next question is, since 2013, going back to, you keep bringing up the Belt and Road. President Xi started this initiative in 2013, the Belt and Road Initiative, and now he's pushing this. 65 countries have joined. Russia, also part of BRICS, has joined. What is the kind of future of BRICS with the Belt and Road?
As if we have a look at the principles of the BRICS and Belt and Road, actually they share the same principles. As we know, the BRICS for them is openness, inclusiveness, and win-win cooperation. They are totally the same in essence. The third is that they also both of them, they started with the economic and trade cooperation. Later on, they are expanding from economic issues to the other issues such as people-to-people exchanges, as well as even political issues. So I think the BRICS cooperation and the Belt and Road, they will merge together in the long run. But right now, it's not the right time.
Well, benefit speaks for itself. For example, the BRICS Bank is there dedicated to those 5 members, but the EIB is really participating not only the Belt and Road countries, but roughly 70 of those member countries come together, but they all focus on infrastructure development. So therefore, every of the BRIC members can really benefit from the financial institution that's there to set up, that they are really crossly linked. And the other issue is that, okay, these emerging economies, they need a bigger market. So they're not really confined with their own domestic market or within the intertrade of the BRICS, but also they need to spread more to many other more countries. So the Belt and Road Initiative, with all the participants in it, really provide at least a platform and a clue for them to do business with better facilitation. So they can really synergize on this one to build the rules for the Belt and Road Initiative, in which China really has quite an open mind to it. So China, time again, repeated to the world that the Belt and Road is not China's, but it's really there to expect the whole world to participate into this one. Yes, we have 65 countries, but we are also open to many more of the participants, one way or the other, in building projects and to have collaboration with even international organizations.
You guys keep talking about complementing each other, both BRICS and the Belt and Road. But kind of the big topic neither of you have touched on is India did not send representation to the Belt and Road Initiative, the major forum that they had last year. Do you see this becoming a problem, India's kind of unwillingness to cooperate or even entertain the idea of the Belt and Road Initiative?
The silence from the Indian government to the really, I think it's really hard for me to understand because of, now the world is globalized. Every part of this continent, globe is interconnected. So in this era, in this kind of era, I think for the most important principle to guide one country's development is to be open to the international market, to be open to its neighbors. So I think if it's smart, if the Indian government is smart enough, it's the right time for Indian government to be clear as for its posture or attitude towards the Belt and Road. But in the long run, thanks to the coordination within the multilateral mechanisms such as the BRICS, such as the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, I think both sides will find the right solutions to solve this problem.
Rationally speaking, you can really draw a very clear map and by building the logic onto it. But every country has their own pride and prejudice. And particularly those BRICS members, most of them have very long history. And now look at these leaders of those BRIC countries. They are all very tough guys. So to sit on the same bench requires a lot of effort. But again, I agree with Professor Wang that they have to see a larger picture of the whole world, instead of turning out to be a roadblock of the China's growth, actually the world growth. So why don't really take the right boat to serve and to sail to the same destiny? So that's something that we have to we need really to be aware.
So talking to these kind of disputes, you're saying that you're seeing progress and hopefully that they'll come to their senses and all countries will move forward. Kind of to sum this all up, what are the key factors to ensure sustainable development for the BRICS cooperation kind of moving into the future?
Well, the BRICS will have to sustain, and they have to balance between the internal politics versus the whole world development. So BRICS cannot really sit on an isolated place. That they need the right of predictable rules and even governing bodies to ensure those rules are really implemented. The Development Bank is one very good example, and to build the currency swap independent, or at least to reduce the reliance on the US dollar, is a very realistic issue to reduce the transaction cost. And then trade facilitation. So that has been quite a lot of achievement in the trade and investment facilitation, but those rules are still sporadic. So we need really to put them into a compact so that they are more transparent. And the other is really the facilitation is not only investment and trade, but also, with all the other economic factors.
As we know, in the past decade, the financial cooperation stayed at the center for the BRICS cooperation. But right now, as the BRICS cooperation with regards to finance has reached the peak with the establishment of the NDB, the CRA, as well as their successful reforms upon the International Monetary Fund and World Bank. It's really urgent for the BRICS to get finish the job. Most important responsibility for the BRICS in the future, in the next decade. I think the leaders in Xiamen, they have to complement this this mission. The second is that it's really urgent for the BRICS to institutionalize their cooperation, and that's why the BRICS summit in Xiamen, they list the institutionalization as one of the 4 top priorities. It's time for them to get down to get a clear answer as for the coordination. Then third is also important for the BRICS to promote the people-to-people exchanges. The more and more people-to-people exchanges with more and more communications, the misunderstandings will collapse, will perish. More and more trust, more and more confidence upon the BRICS cooperation will develop.
Great. Professor Wang, Professor Liu, thank you for being on the show. We look forward to seeing what happens at the summit, and hopefully we get a roadmap and some clear guidance on what comes next. Thank you again.
Thank you.